In our headlines on this Wednesday afternoon, November 8th, here in South Korea. For the fifth month in a row, Korea's current account stayed in the black in September with a surplus of over $5.4 billion as exports marked a slowing annual decline while imports fell further. Beyond borders, Israel maintains its extensive ground operation in Gaza as it claims there will be no ceasefire until Hamas releases all hostages from the October 7th assault in southern Israel. Meanwhile, back on the local front, Seoul is hosting U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken for 2 days starting late Wednesday as North Korea and Russia bolster their weapons collaboration. September saw a surplus in Korea's current account, marking the fifth straight month of favorable figures. Our business correspondent Shin Ha-young starts us off.
South Korea has managed to keep its current account in the black again in September. Preliminary data released by the Bank of Korea on Wednesday shows the country posted a current account surplus of $5.42 billion. This is the fifth straight month that a surplus was recorded, and it was even greater than in the month before. The surplus growth comes on the back of a recovery in exports and lowered global oil prices compared to the same period last year. The goods balance, which tracks imports and exports, saw a surplus of $7.42 billion last month, recording a surplus for the sixth consecutive month. The country exported over $55.6 billion worth of goods, an on-year decrease of 2.4% and the 13th straight on-year decline. By items, shipments of semiconductors are still below last year's figure, but the drop has been slowing down. On the other hand, the drop in imports was greater than that of exports as the cost of importing raw materials dropped due to lower energy prices. A rise in dividend income from Korean subsidiaries located overseas also contributed to the current account surplus. Meanwhile, the services account, which tracks earnings and spending on overseas trips and transport, suffered an extended loss of $3.2 billion. Despite successive surpluses, the total surplus from January to last month is only around $16.6 billion, which is about 65% of the level for the same period last year. The BOK forecasts that the current account will continue to maintain a surplus in October and in the fourth quarter overall as well.
The surplus in the fourth quarter is expected to continue thanks to improvements in the semiconductor industry and strong car exports. But there's a chance the surplus may decrease compared to the third quarter due to uncertainties in oil prices and potential increases in energy imports for winter heating.
He added that despite the uncertainties, the surplus for this year is expected to meet the bank's outlook of $27 billion. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
And the government here is looking to ease the red tape hindering investment initiatives by companies in hopes of facilitating the country's economic rebound. Our Shin Se-byuk reports.
South Korea's government has pledged to ease regulations to expedite the investment project of major corporations as a means of supporting the recent economic recovery trend. This is according to Finance Minister Chu Kyung-ho in an emergency economic meeting on Wednesday.
To further fuel the ongoing economic recovery, the government will expand investments and promote consumption with the goal of revitalizing domestic spending.
To do so, the government rolled out tailored deregulatory measures for 18 private projects worth a total of 46 trillion won, or over $35 billion. Measures include law revisions to help South Korean oil refining company S-Oil secure construction sites for a large-scale petrochemical plant in the southeastern city of Ulsan as part of the $7 billion Saudi Aramco-backed Shaheen project. The refiner has been facing difficulties in securing sites for plant facilities such as storage yards and parking lots due to an act on industrial cluster development. The Sphere K-pop Arena project is also to benefit from the newly announced plan. Currently, the U.S. company is looking to break ground on the venue before 2025 in Hanam, just south of Seoul. The expected feasibility study period, as of now, is over 42 months, but the government's fast-track administrative procedures will shorten it by half. Special rules on hazardous material management will shorten the construction time for battery factories and reduce cost for South Korean battery makers. LG Energy Solution, SK-On, and others are planning to invest nearly 2 trillion won, or over $1.5 billion over the next couple of years to build new facilities in the Chungcheongnam and Pukto provinces. Other projects on the government's support list include the establishment of a world-class art center branch in the southeastern city of Busan and a new airport in the country's southeastern region. 신세벽, Arirang News.
For the first time in 7 years, Korea has been removed from Washington's currency monitoring list. Now, earlier this week, the U.S. Treasury shared its semi-annual report on the foreign exchange policies of its 20 major trading partners against 3 thresholds. Those that meet 2 of the 3 criteria are placed on the monitoring list. Korea and Switzerland were removed from that list, while China, Germany and Taiwan are among those that remain. The criteria include a trade surplus with the U.S. of at least $15 billion, a material current account surplus of at least 3% of the country's GDP, and persistent net foreign currency purchases of at least 2% of GDP over a year. Korea's southern port city of Busan is hosting this year's Invest Korea Summit, and quite a number of foreign firms have pledged investments. Our An Sung-jin was there.
Invest Korea Summit 2023, which nearly 1,000 foreign investors, domestic and overseas companies, and government officials attended, is the largest domestic event promoting foreign investment. Through the summit on Tuesday, the Trade Ministry announced that nearly $950 million worth of foreign direct investment has been pledged to the high-tech industry, particularly in the field of carbon neutrality, quantum computing, future cars, and semiconductors. Despite reduced global investment due to economic uncertainty, South Korea has reached its highest ever aggregate foreign direct investment this year, up to September, of approximately 31 trillion won, or $24 billion. It also saw an on-year increase of 37.5% of large quantity investments, where more than $300 million were traded. As South Korea garners attention as a hub for the energy and semiconductor industries, the country will continue to see a growing amount of foreign direct investment. 2 foreign investors, one of whom secured a deal with a Korean company, suggested potential favorable aspects that make Korea a destination for investors.
Korea is a very attractive market. It's a very outgoing and also technology-guided semiconductor and biotechnology or pharma and such kind of things is definitely a future market.
We recognize the strength and reliability of Korean energy off-takers as customers, but also as really equity partners in our overall energy developments. It also is the commitment by Korean companies to also be very front-footed in the development and rollout and application of the new clean energy technologies.
Apart from the perspective of foreign investors, Trade Minister Bang Mong-gyu said there are other aspects that mark Korea as an attractive market.
A high level of industrial competitiveness, innovation capacity, and an FTA agreement network are the nation's key strengths for foreign direct investment.
Minister Bang also emphasized the role of foreign direct investment companies in Korea's move towards becoming a high-tech industry powerhouse. He also added that government supports these efforts, such as expanding the global supply chain, securing manufacturing capability, and strengthening the technology innovation ecosystem will be necessary. An Sung-jin, Arirang News, Busan.
President Seoul is playing host to Italian President Sergio Mattarella starting later today as they sit down for summit talks. The welcoming ceremony at the Yongsan Presidential Office will officially kick off the three-day state visit, which will cover economic collaboration as well as space and technology. Following a signing ceremony for MOUs, a joint press conference will also be held. President Mattarella landed at Seoul Air Base back on Tuesday, and Korea is his first stop as he seeks to strengthen Italy's interests in Asia. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is flying into Korea later this evening following the G7 foreign ministers meeting in neighboring Japan. Blinken is scheduled to sit down with Foreign Minister Park Jin tomorrow, that is Thursday, to address mutual concerns including North Korea's weapons collaboration with Russia. President Seoul will also meet with Blinken during the latter's two-day visit. Blinken was last here in South Korea in March 2021. In the Middle East, Israeli authorities appear resolute in maintaining their extensive ground mission in Gaza, adding that a ceasefire will only occur if all hostages taken by Hamas are released. Our Lee Sing-jae has the latest.
The Israeli military continues to push forward with their air and ground offensives, with Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant announcing on Tuesday that the Israel Defense Forces troops are now in the heart of Gaza City. Gallant said the forces moved in with coordination from its Air Force and Navy. IDF spokesperson Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari reiterated Israel's stance that there will be no ceasefire as it continues with its offensives in the Gaza Strip. Answering calls for a humanitarian ceasefire and criticism that too many Palestinian civilians have been killed, Hagari said that the IDF has hit more than 14,000 Hamas targets in the region, destroyed more than 100 tunnels, and captured 4,000 weapons, which he said were hidden in civilian infrastructure. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also reiterated his stance on Tuesday that there will be no fuel delivered to Gaza, nor a ceasefire with Hamas, unless hostages seized by the Palestinian militant group are freed. The comments were made during a televised statement marking 1 month since Hamas launched an attack against Israel on October 7th. The Prime Minister also warned Iran-backed Hezbollah that it would be making the mistake of its life if it opens a new front in the armed conflict from its base in Lebanon. While Netanyahu called on Palestinian civilians to move south for their own safety, he made it clear that Israel will not stop with its offensives in the Gaza Strip. Lee Sing-jae, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, Korea is fighting its own battle against bedbugs following rampant reports of these pests over in Paris this past summer. Our Antony reports.
South Korean authorities are fighting bedbugs amid growing public concern as the number of outbreaks, as reported by the Special Response Team on Monday, surpassed 30. The first outbreak was reported in September, which was followed by reports in 17 regions across South Korea, including cities and provinces. Earlier in November, the Ministry of the Interior and Safety launched a special response to contain the growing bedbugs infestations. However, as the number of outbreaks increased, the matter was elevated to be overseen by the Prime Minister's office. A decision was made in the first related meeting held on Tuesday to intensify inspections and pest control starting Monday, focusing on public transportation and accommodation facilities for 4 weeks. In response to concerns about the effectiveness of currently approved bedbug pesticides available domestically, the government has decided to promptly import alternatives. And on the back of reports of bedbug infestations in France and the UK, demand for bedbug repellent in the local market has surged on year. According to reports on Monday, sales of bedbug repellent increased by 813% from the end of October to the 6th of November. Sales of mattress vacuum cleaners also increased by 610%. In addition, demand for products like bedbug traps, which were not popular last year, has also increased. Bedbugs do not transmit disease. However, the bites from these blood-feeding insects can cause itching and lead to secondary skin infections due to scratching. Guidelines published by the government say that when bedbugs are discovered, the use of high-temperature steamers and repellents is effective. When bitten by bedbugs, it is advised to first wash the area with water and soap. A visit to the doctor may also be required depending on symptoms. Authorities are also advising that travelers thoroughly disinfect luggage before storing for an extended period as a way to eradicate them.
Before the latest bedbug outbreak in South Korea, only 9 such reports have been submitted to the government since 2014. 이은희, Arirang News.
The growing presence of drug abuse here in Korea has led to more work for our furry friends at Incheon International Airport. My colleague Choi Soo-young explains.
South Korea is facing an increasing illegal drug threat with a sharp rise in cases during and after the COVID-19 pandemic. This means that sniffer dogs at Incheon International Airport, which is on the country's front line, are also having busier days. They search around 1,000 items daily among the 600,000 pieces of cargo arriving at the airport's logistics center from abroad. These highly trained dogs can detect even tiny amounts of drugs as small as 0.1 of a gram from over 10 meters away.
We typically train them for 4 years. After qualifying in basic training, a select few undergo a 16-week specialized training program. From there, only a few of them become drug detection dogs deployed to work in ports and special cargo areas.
In 2020, sniffer dogs detected 3.4 kilograms of drugs, and this year, as of September, they have found 8.4 kilograms, primarily methamphetamine, also known as Philipon in South Korea. There are 94 drug detection dogs operated by customs inspectors, and out of these, 22 sniffers are actively working at Incheon Airport.
Here in South Korea, drug detection dogs currently used in operations are divided into 3 groups: dogs in training, ready for immediate deployment, and dogs awaiting retirement.
Handlers partner with sniffer dogs for about 5 years until the dogs retire at around 7 to 8 years old. Handlers also help find new homes for them after their retirement. Korea Customs Service dogs are mainly Labrador Retrievers and Spaniels, breeds known for their strong connection with humans, and these dogs find joy in their work and value their playtime with handlers as a reward.
In this era of pet dogs, people don't fear the animals usually, but some of them still freak out when they meet them at the airport. But detection dogs are gentle and friendly. If you encounter them at the airport, just step aside and wait for them to move, and your journey will be enjoyable with these friendly dogs around.
The KCS is considering ways to gradually increase the supply of sniffer dogs to further strengthen its drug prevention efforts. Choi Soo-young, Arirang News.
In other news, as part of efforts to boost production and ease labor, there has been a visible shift in the shape of apple trees here. Our Ian Jin shows us.
On the left is a standard apple tree, and on the right is an apple tree that's recently taken a new shape. Apple trees have long been known for their strong branches that spread out 4 to 5 meters, giving the tree its pyramidal shape. But the latest change to its shape comes from apple farmers taking the main central branch of the tree and laying it horizontally. This allows the shorter branches to grow vertically and is being called the multi-axial method.
Many of us who have grown apples for a long time, we are moving quickly to the multi-axial method. Labour is reduced and production increased, while the quality of the fruit is also significantly higher.
Because the apple tree is more accessible, not only does it make pest control care easier, but farmers can install a net to protect the fruits from hail or typhoons. And the new shape allows the tree to get an even distribution of sunlight, which means farmers don't have to install reflective sheets. A test cultivation batch also showed higher production of up to 3 times the number of apples.
The fruit quality is higher and the size bigger. Growing closer to the ground makes them sweet. This multi-axial branching of the tree makes the fruits get sunlight evenly, which you can see in the color of the apples.
This new multi-axial method of laying the main branch of fruit trees horizontally has already gained great popularity among farmers, and its application is expected to expand to other fruit trees in the near future. Ian Jin, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. In the UK, the state opening of Parliament commenced on Tuesday by the new British monarch, King Charles III. In the first King's speech in more than 70 years, King Charles delivered the government's plans in a ceremony marking the first day of a new parliamentary session. In the speech, the King outlined Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's planned legislation, which included approval of new oil and gas development in the North Sea, curbing of smoking by minors, support for Ukraine and humanitarian aid to Gaza. King Charles made a special mention of South Korea's President Yoon and First Lady Kim, saying that he is looking forward and welcomes the South Korean state visit due later this month. President Yoon Suk-yeol will visit Britain this month at the invitation of King Charles III to mark the 140th anniversary of diplomatic relations between Korea and Britain. In Asia, Myanmar's military government on Tuesday began its first joint naval exercise with Russia in the Andaman Sea. The three-day joint maritime security exercise involving aircraft as well as naval vessels focuses on land, air, and sea defense tactics. The drills will last until Thursday. Since Aung San Suu Kyi's elected government was ousted by the country's military in February 2021, Myanmar has seen the violent suppression of democratic protests, leading to thousands of deaths. Russia and China are major weapons suppliers of Myanmar's military government, with 28 Russian private and public companies transferring weapons such as advanced missile systems and fighter jets to the country since the 2021 coup d'etat. A UN human rights report on Myanmar's human rights situation in May outlined that Russia has supplied $406 million and China $267 million of weapons and material to Myanmar's military government since 2021. In the US, the co-working space company WeWork filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection on Monday in New Jersey. After years of financial problems that has led to a net long-term debt of $2.9 billion and with over $13 billion of long-term leases, the cornered company stated that it is to raise about $3 billion of debt through a restructuring support agreement. WeWork, which as of June offered modern office spaces in 777 locations in 39 countries, was once hailed as an exemplary unicorn startup and valued as high as $47 billion. It suffered from a 98% decline in its share prices this year. In Europe, the French military leader Napoleon Bonaparte's hat is up for auction. The iconic bicorn black beaver felt hat is expected to fetch around $850,000 at auction. It has been the trademark of the late 18th and early 19th century leader's attire, along with his frock coat. Napoleon's hat will be on sale at the Ozena auction house in Fontainebleau, Paris on November 19th. Kim Seong, Arirang News.
On peut pas faire plus symbolique que ça.
Good afternoon. It's Ipdong today, marking the onset of winter on the seasonal calendar. And it surely was an early winter-like morning across Korea, with many places seeing the first frost and ice of the season. But the early cold snap eases this afternoon. Even a cold wave advisory in parts of Gyeongsang-do provinces have also been lifted. Afternoon highs are going up to norms today, nearly 5 degrees higher than yesterday here in Seoul. So a morning winter jacket might feel too warm for the day. Then Mother Nature will give us a break from early winter weather tomorrow. Sunny skies to start out the day, then more clouds will be rolling in as the day goes on. Highs will go up 4 to 5 degrees higher this afternoon in most places. Seoul topping out at 15 degrees, Busan at 20 degrees this afternoon. Then the early winter chill returns on Friday, and the weekend is set to be a freezing one, with morning temperatures dropping to sub-zero levels here in Seoul, so please stay warm. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
And those are the headlines at this hour. We have our panel session coming up right after this break, so do stay with us. Thank you for now.
Busan, Korea is already reaching the entire world, like ocean waves that travel far and wide. It's Busan, the perfect World Expo city, transforming our world, navigating toward a better future.
What would you say in Korean in this exact situation? Find out in Paycheck, conversing in Korean.
Contour the world, simply contour. India, the United Kingdom, New Zealand. Woo!
I'm excited. Are you excited?
Of course.
Yeah.
Music, start.
Seoul is hosting top U.S. diplomatic and defense officials this month amid heightened concerns over North Korea's weapons collaborations and its planned third spy satellite launch. So what is the latest with regard to Pyongyang's planned third launch? What can be done to address its blatant violations of UN Security Council resolutions? And what are the broader implications of North Korea closing a number of its overseas diplomatic missions?
Welcome to Issues and Insiders. Today we touch upon diplomatic engagements amid efforts to better address security entanglements, if I may, with our foreign journalists. For this, I have Stephen here in the studio with me. Stephen, welcome.
Good afternoon.
I also have Jacko with us. Jacko, it's been a while. Welcome back.
Hello, thanks for having me again.
Right, Stephen, we'll begin with diplomatic matters then. So Foreign Minister Park Jin is poised to host US Secretary of State Antony Blinken starting later this evening here in Seoul. What issues, Stephen, look to top their agenda?
Last I checked, the Foreign Ministry had not released the official details of their agenda, but I think we can be pretty sure that recent movements involving North Korea will be pretty high on their agenda. The U.S. and South Korea have recently flagged what they say were exchanges of arms between Russia and North Korea, and I think there's a lot of concern about a potential technical advisory role that Russia could play in North Korea's weapons development. I've spoken to some experts who say that North Korea has a lot to gain from technical assistance from Russia in these areas, and that could make a kind of substantive difference to their weapons development. But I believe this is the first trip here by a U.S. Secretary of State in more than 2 years. And so I think on a symbolic level and on a rhetorical level, we'll hear a lot about the U.S. ongoing commitment to defending South Korea. Under the previous U.S. administration, there was some questions as to whether the U.S. was as steadfastly committed to that as they had been in the past. But under President Biden and under President Yoon, the two sides have been very resolute and very clear in their messaging that they are committed to working together. When Yoon traveled to the U.S. earlier this year, they came away with the nuclear consultative agreement. And so I expect Blinken's visit to be a kind of continuation of along this path.
Right. And Jack, I'm going to expand on something that Stephen just talked about, Russia's technical assistance to North Korea. South Korean intelligence authorities claim that North Korea is poised to make a third attempt at placing a spy satellite into orbit and that this planned mission may actually be a success. Do you suppose Moscow has indeed shared its rocket know-how with Pyongyang? And if that is the case, how worried should we be, do you think?
Yeah, well, when Kim Jong-un visited Russia in September, Russia's President Vladimir Putin said that he would help the DPRK to launch satellites. And that was, of course, after Russia's Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu visited a military parade and checked out the military hardware in Pyongyang back in July. And then most recently in October, we had Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov also visiting Pyongyang to talk with Kim Jong-un and his Foreign Minister Choi Son-hee. So we have three very significant and public shows of support from Russia for North Korea. But apart from the claims by the South Korean National Intelligence Service, I haven't seen any specific details yet that show exactly what sort of technical support Russia has given North Korea. Now, according to National Assembly member Yoo Sang-bom, who was in a closed-door intelligence briefing by the NIS recently, he said that the North appears to have received technical assistance from Russia and is likely checking the launch vehicle's engine and the launch mechanism before trying for a third time to launch the satellite that failed twice this year. But he didn't give any more specific information about what sort of technical help may have been received, probably for security reasons. So in short, we don't know exactly what kind of tech
Russia has shared with North Korea. But it seems that given these shows of support and that Russia has said, or Putin said, we will help, they probably are, and maybe there's some kind of a tit-for-tat deal with North Korea in exchange for military hardware or bullets or shells that it has sent to Russia for the war against Ukraine. Now, how worried should we be? I'm not a sower of panic seeds, so I would say that, of course, the government should be concerned because it's not a good thing, but the average citizen need not be too worried by it.
Right. And Stephen, as Jaco mentioned, intelligence authorities here claim that North Korea may have shipped some 2,000 containers of weapons to Russia, including short-range ballistic missiles. Is there nothing, Stephen, that the international community can do to perhaps curb North Korea's blatant violations of UN Security Council resolutions?
Well, the nature of those resolutions and of all kind of international law is that they are not enforceable in any practical way. These are, at the end of the day, these are sovereign countries, and if they decide to trade between them, they can do that. What we are left with is sanctions. I mean, North Korea and Russia are pretty tightly sanctioned already. I believe in the intro we heard about how North Korea has recently closed some of their embassies in a couple of African countries, and there were reports also of Spain and Hong Kong, and some experts have interpreted that as a sign that these sanctions are biting, perhaps harder than in the past. So really what the international community can do is attempt to cut off Russia and North Korea even further from the international financial system, to make it harder for them to import things that they need for their militaries and to export things that they could profit from. And other than that, there's the oldest diplomatic tool in the shed, which is persuasion, which is trying to convince them that they would be better off not doing this, that they would be better off taking a different tack and engaging more productively with the outside world on economic matters, and in seeking to enrich themselves that way. That's a very tall task. I mean, both of these countries seem to be pretty determined to pursue aggressive actions that the rest of the world does not approve of, but at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to, unless we're going to wage war, and I don't think anybody really wants another war.
Right, of course not. And Jaco, speaking within your capacity as the host of a podcast on North Korea, what have pundits on your show been saying about ways to better stem North Korea's flagrant violations of Security Council resolutions?
Yeah, a lot of people that I've spoken to point to China and Russia as the main enablers of what's seen as North Korea's bad behavior. Now, North Korea, of course, by itself kind of thumbs its nose at UN resolutions and sanctions. It says we're a sovereign state, we'll do what we choose according to our national interest. So a threat of sanctions really do little to put fear into the hearts of the leaders in Pyongyang. And with China and Russia helping North Korea to flout sanctions and resolutions, people point to those two countries because without their active assistance, sanctions enforcement falls quite flat. Now, on episode 304 of the NK News podcast, I actually interviewed Eric Penton-Vogt, who was the former coordinator of the United Nations panel of experts into looking at North Korean sanctions and how they're enforced and how they're evaded. And what I learned from him, amongst other things, is that sanctions need to be reinforced by every individual member state of the United Nations. It's not up to 1 or 2 or even 5 nations. Sanctions only work if everybody follows the line. So the United Nations Secretary General may try to use his bully pulpit to name and shame countries that don't enforce sanctions, but I think that he may have bigger and more urgent fish to fry at this time in the world, so that's probably unlikely. So otherwise, the UN might want to consider just accepting that sanctions enforcement will always be flawed and full of holes as long as there are states that are willing to help North Korea to get around them.
Right, indeed. And Jaco, as Stephen mentioned, the regime, North Korea, has closed quite a number of its diplomatic missions abroad, including in Angola and over in Spain as well. Pundits here claim that the move itself is a reflection of these sanctions that you mentioned, of the financial struggles of keeping them afloat, these diplomatic missions. What do you say?
Yes, it certainly could be a reflection of financial difficulties. We have seen this before during the Great Famine in North Korea in the mid-1990s. About 10 overseas embassies and diplomatic offices were closed, and that was due to financial difficulties, according to Tae Yong-ho, who himself was a former North Korean diplomat. diplomat. But also over the years, North Korea has opened and closed embassies in various places, depending or in line with its current strategies and business focuses. So, for example, in 2002, North Korea opened an embassy in Canberra, Australia, and then it closed that embassy only 6 years later in 2008, citing financial difficulties. And I think that North Korea had hoped that trade and investment from Australia to North Korea would be greater than it turned out to be. And so when that didn't pay off, it switched its focus in choosing instead to reopen its embassy in Myanmar, which had been closed for more than 20 years since the Rangoon bombing of 1983. So sometimes focuses shift, and that can be another reason for it. Now, Tae Yong-ho's memoir about his time as a North Korean diplomat, he talks about his experience in trying to raise money. He said that every North Korean embassy overseas has to be financially self-sufficient and also able to send money back to Pyongyang for various purposes. So it's commonly understood that embassies have to be making money, whether that be through open trade activities or through illicit means like smuggling cigarettes that are duty-free, for example. So it could be that those embassies in Uganda and Angola and Spain weren't making much money anymore and sort of decided to close them down and focus elsewhere. Closing the consulate in Hong Kong was a bit of a surprise to me. I didn't expect to see that happen, but we may not know why that was chosen for some time, and it's a little bit opaque at this stage. So it's certainly the first multiple embassy closure at the same time that we've seen in decades, and that certainly it could be a sign of probably reflects financial difficulties, and it's not a good thing. I mean, North Korea shutting itself off from the world means that it tends to become more insular, more isolated, less communication with other countries. So that's not a positive thing that we should be applauding. We should be trying to see North Korea connecting with the outside world and getting more voices in.
Right, indeed. Moving forward, Stephen, last year, the APEC summit was interrupted by a North Korean missile test, which led to the opening of a crisis meeting. This year, the summit comes amid fresh fighting between Israel and Hamas. Do you believe a joint statement of sorts may be possible at the APEC, which starts, I believe, this coming weekend, with regard to the conflict in the Middle East?
I'm not much in the prediction business, but I would say that it will be quite challenging. When the APEC finance ministers convened earlier this year, they were not able to issue a joint statement due to objections from China and Russia on wording as pertaining to Ukraine. I attended the G20 in India in September, and the consensus leading up to that meeting was that the leaders were unlikely to be able to reach a statement, agree on a statement because of those same kinds of objections. But in the end, they did put out a joint statement which contained some kind of softened language on Ukraine. So will the leaders at the APEC summit be able to reach a similar kind of compromise? They might. I think the hosts and the people who are invested in the carrying out of these kinds of meetings are, I think, doing everything they can because it reflects better on them if they're able to come up with some kind of tangible results. But as we all know, the world we live in is really kind of, it seems like, growingly divided on a number of very contentious issues. You know, we had the war in Ukraine, we had China's role in the world as pertains to the economy and to security, and now the conflict in the Middle East is, I think, more central in the global conversation than it's been in a very long time, at least since maybe 2006 or so, if not even longer. And that situation is dragging on. It's perhaps not quite as intense as it was a week or two ago, but it's still something that warrants some sustained attention. And will that make it impossible for leaders to strike a kind of mutually agreeable statement? I think it very well might, but I'm interested to see what happens.
Right, indeed. And staying within the APEC framework, Stephen, do you suppose that broader economic interests within this particular framework and among its members, of course, including the US and China, will perhaps keep these two superpowers from dwelling too much on their security differences?
That's a kind of optimistic suggestion, I think, when you look at the US-China relationship, when you just take a step back and factor into just how much economically is at stake, how many companies have interests in both countries, and just how much trade goes back and forth between the two countries. You would think that that would provide a strong incentive to want to cooperate and want to put security concerns aside. The U.S., again, as they often seem to be, are getting ready for another election. And so I think Biden wants to do everything he can to have some strong economic figures heading into the election. So now there is never a good time for a trade war, but I think now is particularly bad time for trade friction with China. We've seen in recent years the complications presented by disruptions to supply chains as pertains to important items like semiconductors. I don't think anybody wants to go down that road. So if I was advising the leaders of either country, I would be advising them to focus on the things that they have in common, focus on areas of potential mutual gain, and try to leave all but the most pressing security concerns off the table. For now, APEC is primarily a forum for discussion of economic matters. So that will definitely be a big issue to watch over the weekend.
Right. Back here in the country, Jaco, U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin is poised to arrive in the country next week, I believe, for the security consultative meeting with his counterpart, Defense Minister Shin Won-sik. What looks to top their talks, Jaco, do you think?
Yeah, so these are annual meetings, as you pointed out. They're the annual security consultative meetings between the two ministers of defense. Now, as the readout from the U.S. Department of Defense said, issues that are top of mind for both of those officials are, number one, efforts by both the United States and the Republic of Korea to maintain a strong combined defense posture to deter and respond to DPRK nuclear and missile threats. That's the first thing, which is pretty much the same every year. And the second thing is the importance of expanding regional cooperation between the United States and the Republic of Korea, including US, ROK, Japan trilateral security cooperation. And that's something that we've seen really under President Yoon as being an area of focus, and also in the Camp David meetings earlier this year too. So those are two very important topics for them to talk about. Now, last month, the US and Korea commemorated 70 years since the signing of the Mutual Defense Treaty in 1953. So that's a very celebratory mood right now, and the attitude, I imagine, between the two defense officials are very collegial and positive these days. Also, the Republic of Korea UN Command Member States Defense Ministerial meeting is taking place at the same time, and that's a meeting of member states of the UN Command, which was established in 1950 to help South Korea stopping the invasion by North Korea. I haven't seen any more details of this particular meeting yet and what we can expect there, and I'm not even sure which member states will be present, so we'll find out in due course. Now, at the same time as visiting Korea, Lloyd Austin will also visit India and Indonesia, and this is part of Washington putting a real strategic focus and emphasis on the Indo-Pacific region. And in both these countries, he'll be meeting with the defense ministers there, and ASEAN talks in Indonesia. While in India, the meeting will also involve the US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, and his Indian counterpart. So these are three big meetings taking place all in the Indo-Pacific region, once again reinforcing that for the United States, this is an important area of global affairs and its own defense strategy.
Right, indeed. Across the border in North Korea, Stephen, the regime has designated, I believe, November 18th, a day to mark last year's testing of its Hwasong-17 ICBM. Could you tell us more about this designation and its potential implications?
It comes across to me as just a further entrenchment of the military and of weaponry into the kind of, not just the political identity of the country, but the general, public life of the country. I mean, we're talking about a military-first political system, a kind of military-first society. If I could, I would borrow some from some analysis that Jaco offered earlier, that this is, in a normal country, in a democracy, leaders might say to their constituents that, we've improved the economy, we've improved infrastructure, we have, better schools, better hospitals, but North Korea kind of presents these achievements in weaponry as a sign that the state is working to protect the citizenry. I guess the North Korean government does not see its role as delivering well-being or happiness in a kind of broadly defined manner. It sees its job as delivering security. And so perhaps what they're seeking to do here is show the people of the country that while they do not enjoy prosperity as much of the rest of the world enjoys it, they are not rich, they are not free in a number of ways, they do not enjoy the civil and political rights of people in lots of other countries, but the state is working to protect them. And, you know, you can make an argument that the primary role of any state anywhere in the world is to first and foremost provide security. So I would understand it along those lines.
Right. Jacko, November 18th would be next Saturday, if I'm not mistaken, and they're calling this the Missile Industry Day, I believe. Do you suppose we're looking ahead to a potential missile testing on that particular day?
Yeah, I don't like to make predictions, but there is a school of thought that says that North Korea periodically tests a missile or does something else that South Korea and the United Nations Command deems provocative because they don't feel that they're getting enough attention and they want more attention. But I don't yet see any signs at the moment that North Korea particularly wants attention or is looking for talks or to leverage something or to gain concessions. So I don't anticipate missile launches or similar acts, but of course there can always be internal reasons why they may test a missile, which could be, you know, to perfect a particular type of technology, such as a re-entry vehicle or a solid rocket engine or the hypersonic glide structures. So, you know, and of course we have the satellite launch coming up, which we thought might be coming up in October, but it didn't happen. So that may happen in the next month or two. Now, North Korea's leadership might decide that now is not the time to be launching missiles into the sea because Russia and China, they're busy getting their own house in order, but there's also a big focus on what's happening in Ukraine and in Gaza. But with the general elections coming up next April in South Korea, we may see an attempt by North Korea to influence local politics by doing something that is deemed to be threatening here in the South. That wouldn't surprise me, but again, no specific predictions from me. We'll just have to wait and see. These are all possible, and they're things that we've seen before, so they may happen again.
Right. So
if I could jump in and ask a quick question, you know, how much influence do you think North Korea potentially holds over public opinion here? Because I just feel like, you know, a local election is typically dominated by local concerns. So were there to be a North Korean provocation of some kind, just to what extent do you think that could sway the way people vote ahead of that?
It's a great question. I'm not a pollster, so I don't know to what extent those public opinion can be swayed, but I do know that back in the 1990s there was a belief here on the conservative side of politics in South Korea that any behavior threatening by North Korea would increase the focus in South Korean voters on security issues and then would lead to more votes for the conservative side. Now, whether that's actually true, it's hard to test that because you need to have, you know, ideally two situations and you know, with a minimal difference, but I'm not sure.
Right. All right, well, I suppose that's all the time we have for this edition. Thank you so much, Jacko, as always, for your insights. And Stephen, thank you very much for your time and thoughts.
Thank you.
Right, well, that ends this edition of Issues and Insiders. Thank you for watching. See you same time tomorrow.